Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of OpenObservability Talks. I'm your host, Dotan Horvitz, and here at OpenObservability Talks, we talk about anything DevOps, observability, and open source. For those following the DevOps Dozen Awards, we are on the finalists for Best DevOps-related podcast, so thanks a lot for everyone who voted us in and supported us. Now waiting for the final results to come. I'd like to also thank our sponsors, Logs.io, the cloud-native observability platform. Logs.io uses the best-of-breed open-source projects such as Prometheus, Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, Jaeger, OpenTelemetry, and so on. So thank you very much, Logs.io. And for those joining the live stream on YouTube or Twitch, feel free to share questions and comments on the chat. It makes it much more fun to engage, so do that. And with that, let's move on to today's episode. And today, we'll talk about Sas Observability. So many of us run a SaaS product, and these systems have common characteristics like supporting PLG, product-led growth, and pay-as-you-go, and many other things that are needed to move fast and agile. And observability plays a key role in enabling that. And that is what we're going to see and how to do it right today. And for that topic, I invited Aviad Mizrachi, the co-founder and CTO of Frontegg, and a software architect in Seoul, who's seen dozens of SaaS customers across the industry. I'm sure he'll provide us with many insights around that. Hi, Aviad.
Hey, Dotan. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here on the show. So, Aviad, you've seen so many SaaS systems. You've been part of that as in-house and also customers throughout the years. So maybe you can give us your take and a bit of your history and about Frontegg, the company you founded, and maybe the industry trends that brought you to found this startup.
Yeah, sure. So we founded Frontegg 2 years ago. My awesome co-founder Sagi, which acts as the CEO of the company, and myself. And we basically met a few years before that in one of the biggest cybersecurity companies out there called Checkpoint, where we had the privileges and honor of building a SaaS platform which basically accelerated the cloudification motion in Checkpoint. So in Checkpoint, we had so many on-prem products, and we needed to move them as fast as we can to the cloud. And instead of rebuilding the entire stuff again and again and again, we basically built a platform that was the SaaS platform of Checkpoint and basically helped our customers engaging and migrating to the cloud much faster and much easier. And when we left Checkpoint, we basically discovered that the problem and the issue that we had in Checkpoint, where you want to have a rapid go-to-market, you want to bring your product as fast as you can to the market, is not something that's unique to Checkpoint. On the contrary, basically, the same thing happens to all of the startups out there, where you want to move to the cloud, move to a SaaS model as fast as you can. You want to bring revenue as fast as you can. And we'll talk a little bit about maybe some of the pricing models that needs to adapt to the observability needs to adapt to them. And basically what we did with setting up Frontegg is we built a platform for SaaS applications, which basically deals with user management flows from sign up to checkout, where all the analytics in the middle takes care. So that's what we do.
And I think you mentioned these trends that obviously are not unique to Checkpoint. Many companies there that face these models and need to move fast, need to support delivery rates. We're talking about agile and continuous delivery models. We're talking about, you mentioned consumption-based model, pay as you go, and similar like that. So how do you see these trends in the industry playing a role in the requirements that we have and that we're facing today?
Yeah, so this is what fascinates me in my position in Frontegg, because I meet so many startups and so many, potential leads, customers around the industry, and like different aspects of the industry, deep tech and non-deep tech, and basically all of them needs to go and to set up their basically their product, their beta product, their alpha product as fast as they can. And I think one of the key aspects that we see in terms of agility is that you want to move fast, you wanna set something up, and fail fast is something that we see repetitive in the. You wanna put something out there, give your customers tryout, listen for the feedback, and monitor their feedback by different tools, and we'll touch base on these tools in a bit. But basically, once you put it out there and you let customers experience with that, that's the best feedback that's possible, and that shortened the delivery times for all of the newer products that we see out there. This is where we see it.
Yeah, definitely. So, being the master architect of Frontegg and seeing so many customers, maybe we'll start by, before even observability, just how does the common SaaS, in terms of the technology stack, look like today?
Yeah, so in terms of stack, if we look at it from an architecture point of view, so obviously microservices is the new monolith. So nothing is built on monolith anymore. Microservices are the new way to build products. From obviously it brings some struggles for the developers in terms of deployment and that kind of stuff. But you even if you build like an MVP for, I don't know, showcase for investors, once you go live, you go on a microservices based, and that basically remove the burden of which language do you develop with, which framework are you using. So you choose the right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
We see a little bit of differentiation between the type of companies. So if you go to the deep tech companies, the ones that do AI, so they would normally use Python even for the web development, because that's what the developers feel comfortable with. We see a lot of Node.js on the backend for front-end deployments on the web applications. And other than that, for the compute intensive, we see a lot of Golang, which acts as the new king now. And some still work with Java and even .NET Core. So yeah.
You're being modest, saying some. I think that still Java and .NET, at least from my users and customers and engagement, still .NET and Java have their own place definitely in the backend realm. But Go seems to be picking up very nicely, and it's interesting to talk about the distinction between the data-oriented startups where the Python is so dominant, rather than the others that have a different mention. And maybe you should mention that maybe Kubernetes is also probably, I see that, I'm sure that you see it as the framework to enable the containerization and the microservices.
Yeah, so most of the companies we work with are using Kubernetes, obviously. We even have a hybrid deployment where we allow customers to install our solution on-prem, and our deployment is based on hybrid charts, and no one said anything because Kubernetes is the new standard. So
a new standard, and it's independent of the underlying cloud or on-prem. So it's really a cool way to provide deployments that are independent of that. That's
correct.
That's great. So now that you understand roughly what the stack looks like, and I agree with you, it's pretty much also what I see in terms of the common stack in SaaS businesses and SaaS users. The question is then now, what which observability is needed in such over such stacks?
Wow. So obviously there is the infrastructure observability and the application observability, which can be different and should be different, and the stakeholders for these are different. So if we talk about Kubernetes, so the infrastructure and the cluster observability, we see a lot of Prometheus taking care, like dominates this observability today. But that's a thin line, because the Prometheus basically acts as what we call the bridge between the developers and DevOps, because I can tell you a little bit about the way that we do it. In Frontegg, basically every flow in the definition of done has to go through specific counters that the application developers has to add, and we add counters on this for the Prometheus and Grafana dashboards, and that's that's like the thin line, because when we just start with Kubernetes, obviously it's very easy to take the analytics and put them out there, and we go to the head of DevOps and say, well, this is yours, and they say, yeah, it used to be mine, but now add your application metrics so we can see what led to this spike of CPU or to this spike of memory. So Prometheus acts as a great way to collect observability from the cluster, and then we go to the developer logs. So it's either Fluentd collectors or any of them. We are using logs for logs.io for pushing all the developers logged into. There are a lot of other options as well, but the correlation between, and this is what the microservices brings into the table. The hard thing about microservices is that you have to correlate the logs.
Yeah.
And you have to build a framework so we have Jaeger on top of that, but even without Jaeger, there is a struggle to put a trace ID that goes around the microservices and basically helps us identify issues.
Yeah, that's a very common pattern that I see in the industry. The correlation is becoming increasingly crucial. So the very basic pattern is around obviously putting the trace ID as part of the logs. Some take it a step further and bake it into the observability framework. For example, at Logs.io, we made it an inherent correlation that can in one click switch from one to the other. But move. So some have it in one way or the other. But it's important to understand that it's no longer enough to just look at the metrics or look at the logs, and you need the correlation. And I think going back to the SaaS challenges, I think SaaS more than anything else, just look at the outage, the AWS outage, 3 outages actually in the past month or so, and taking down so many SaaS companies, very high profile ones. So the availability to begin with, obviously, and the uptime, and then the quality of experience, the having responsiveness and low latency are crucial in my view for having a successful and competitive SaaS product. And increasingly as the users become more accustomed to having this sort of level of service level, let's say, you're expected to do that. Do you see similar from your customers?
Yeah, obviously. So we are so Frontegg basically provides, as part of our user management platform, when our customers integrate Frontegg into their product, basically that's the way Frontegg is the way for their customers to log into the product. So if we are down, basically if we are out, none of our customers and none of our customers of the customers can basically log into the that's the B2B2B model. So none of the end users basically can log into the product, which basically takes the entire idea of being up like one step farther. So we work on all the time on multi-regions. The observability here for us is crucial because we have to know ahead of our customers that something is wrong in order to switch to another region, in order to switch to an hot cluster that we have waiting, that kind of stuff. We have to be aware of that. So we have all kinds of ways to basically monitor that. We have a system of developers on call that wait and see and get alerted basically by tools like Aws Genie if something is wrong. Even a simple internal server error in the system basically wakes us up in the middle of the night. And that's as crucial as it gets for us because, the quality of service in that kind of infrastructure needs to be spotless.
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny. I had the privilege of hosting, a senior SRE from Google, who was in charge of all their identity services, and he was talking about the same challenge, saying, if my services, my microservices are down, no one can log into the Gmail or Google Cloud or Google account. So that's you're in the central point with Frontegg. But then again, you talked about how you work and the developer having to, part of the definition of done is to deliver the specific metrics. And what we do at Logs.io, obviously, it's very similar. Each developer needs to expose in my company, as a standard part of the sprint and the delivery of that feature is the metrics and the relevant observability for as we said, the availability and performance of the application. But then again, there is also additional aspects that the product manager defines as part of the feature, additional types of observability that serve to understand maybe higher degrees of how the feature performs in terms of the product KPIs. How much was the usage, how many opened, how many engaged with different CTAs, calls to action, and obviously it can go further and further. So and again, so we, as part of the product definition, you also have the section that the developers need to expose metrics, let's say, to amplitude events, or maybe to other types of user events and so on. I'm curious to hear what kinds of other additional observability you encounter.
Yeah, sure. So I only say one thing about that as a founder of a company, that, when we talk about the new generation of products, we keep hearing the word PLG and bottom up. So if, I founded Frontegg 2 years ago. I think one of the first infrastructures that we added was Logs.io. And we used the community version for, 6 months before we turned into a paying customers. And this is what PLG is. You start using it, but by the time that you are using it, this is very important for me as a founder to know who are my freemium customers, what is their engagement level with the product. How soon do I believe that they can be converted into paying, or are there a freemium forever users? Okay, and this is so important to collect the metrics from. So there are all kinds of metrics, and I keep telling when we talk about it internally, 90% of what happens in the product, usually in products which are a little bit deeper or infrastructure based, is happening behind the scenes, right? APIs. So when you start, so you have a user which is signing up to the product, and you want to see what exactly they are doing, where do they hit, how did they get to the product. And basically, when you take a look at that, tools like Amplitude Mixpanel, heap are perfect because they'll give you basically on a user level the funnel that they went through. And this is crucial for products. This is crucial for UX developers because you want to make sure that the experience that your product is given to them is spotless. But once they sign up, basically, and start engaging with the product, if your product is providing APIs, so the entire movement goes to the backend. And then you want to make sure that basically the observability is happening on the backend side. So there are a bunch of tools today that identify this problem and providing you with API observability, API calls observability. But there the issue is, how do you handle accounts, right? So in today's world, every user can belong to multiple accounts, and then you want to have aggregated views, and then the problem goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So eventually what we did is integrate with tools like Mixpanel and like Heap to collect user analytics. We even have tools that record sessions for us to see tools like Full Story. We are using SmartLook to record basically sessions and to see what exactly is going wrong with the session. Where it can be really addictive to watch sessions of users because you keep watching it and so one day you see two users stuck on this screen and the others and you say, well, we have to change this screen, but then one day later they're stuck in different screens. So
I prefer the aggregations. Yeah.
yeah. And then on the API, it's take a look. If we take a look at Frontegg, for example, and I think Logs.io has the same issue. We work in environments, so we have dev, staging, and production environments. And in some of the cases, we wanna see the aggregated view of all of your APIs in all of the environments. And if I go to Logs.io, for example, so in Logs.io, I have 4 or 5 regions already, split it into staging, US, AWS, Azure, and in one place, I want to see all of my usage as Frontegg on all of my regions. So how many logs I ingested and that kind of stuff. So that brings basically a little bit of complication into idea of collecting metrics as an organization or as an account.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is a very interesting point because on this podcast, in many discussions, we talk about let's call it the developer or the IT signals around logging, metrics, traces. But then again, there are additional signals that are around, as you said, it could be signals coming from Amplitude or events sent to Amplitude that are designated for that. It could be signals coming from even customer support types of channels and other inputs that can come. And the question is, and the need to build a broader observability and also observability that serves additional personas. So obviously, the engineer will need to ultimately implement the instrumentation to get this. But then again, it doesn't serve the end customer. It may serve the product manager to understand if the feature is being used as expected, both in terms of velocity, in terms of flows, and so on. It could serve the UX designer to check, to validate some sort of decisions on the UX side. It could be even business decisions, understanding if, for example, a very interesting use case that I heard from one of my customers. It's a company that engages with payments around for restaurants. I think I can mention the name, Tabit. They mentioned that, so they need to track, and for them it's a rule of thumb saying we don't release a feature before it's fully instrumented, and we can have full observability. If it's not managed, it doesn't go to production. And things like how many e-payments were performed, or if the people in the restaurant leave a tip via the point of sale or directly to the waiter, and maybe validate some assumptions whether it's more comfortable for people, or if they leave bigger tips, if it's via the not with the pressure of the waiter standing on top of you. Things like that are not technical. They're product assumptions, sometimes even business assumptions about the transactions and things like that, and that's ultimately yet another signal. They use our product, but regardless of the product that you use, the essence is that this is the type of observability that is needed, it is essential for a SaaS to actually validate assumptions and be able to pivot and adjust and move fast. So how do you see that?
Yeah, so it's a great point, because observability had many stakeholders, right? So the product might have interest. He will not have interest in the developer logs in logs.io, but the customer support has basically these needs for these logs. And it's like the developer we call it the sink for all of them, because he needs to basically distribute all the logs, all the relevant key factors, all the relevant data to all of these different tools. But eventually, as you mentioned, there are different stakeholders. And one of the most fascinating problem that we see today in the PLG world is how do we identify? So in marketing, there is the marketing qualified lead and the product qualified lead. So what is the engagement level that is required from a customer or potential lead from being a product qualified lead? And it can be different. So if you ship all the data from the API, from the product, so each product manager can basically decide what is the factor that makes this user, this account, a product qualified lead. There could be an engagement with a product for, I don't know, 3 APIs a day for 5 consecutive days. The developer needs to distribute all of them, but the decision shouldn't be part of the developer work. It should be I don't know, some ETL that runs in the background and makes these decisions. So you understand that basically we wanted to move fast, and we wanted to build a great product and get a great go-to-market. But once we move away from the code and start migrating to business-wise decisions, the developer needs to be there. And he needs to make sure that all of the metrics are going outside. And from based on my experience, these quantities will change. They will change. So today it might be 5 consecutive days of APIs, and tomorrow I say, well, it's not a good metric. Let's do 3 days. And you don't want to change the code. You want to make sure that because you want to make sure that you have all the history. And it's funny because what interests the developer in most of the cases, because he needs to debug issues, he needs to make sure that his code is rock solid, would be errors in logs.io, would be, I don't know, for the front-end guys, error in tools like Sentry or that kind of stuff, that he wants to make sure that what exactly is breaking. And the data needs to just pipe into there, and let's have the BI analyst work on the data and make sure who is product qualified lead and who is not. And this is really, really important in the world of PLG, because you are opening everything, and you want to make sure that you know all the time what exactly where is the key point that the customer goes from a free model to a paying model.
Yeah. And also that's on the initial onboarding, and obviously afterwards you can look at any launch of a feature as a mini product in its own right. So launching a new feature, usually, for example, in our case, we define the events that are relevant, and obviously how they map. What are the major KPIs? How these map to the master, the North Star KPI, like in a WAPU, the weekly active paying users, for instance, and then derive the feature-specific APIs, and then with that define which events we need to track. And then we build a whole dashboard for just the launch of that feature to track the onboarding of that. So I'm saying each feature is like a microcosmos of a launch of a mini product. So it's in a smaller scale, but the same thing. So and we, as you said, one of the things that we found essential. By the way, not in many other past companies that I worked with, I had this luxury, but here we have. In my current company, we have actually a BI analyst that can actually support that. So and they're the masters of data. They can help us better understand. First of all, validate even that this is the right feature that we need to do, because they can assess, for example, how many people actually approach that area of the product, because this is sort of total addressable market for that feature. People actually get exposed to that feature, and they can assess the correlation to the master KPIs of the product. And afterwards, they help build the launch dashboard. Afterwards, there's an ongoing dashboard that is even different because it's more aggregated. So I definitely see that happening. You mentioned several tooling that you threw. Maybe we can talk, because not everyone knows all the names that you dropped. So maybe
sorry for the name dropping.
Your recommended stack for observability in the greatest.
Yeah. So if we start from the front end side, so we rely heavily on Sentry. Sentry Collects is a great tool for collecting front end related issues. To track where issues happens on different browsers, different locations, and even including the stack trace for that specific issue. So you can even connect your CI/CD into it, and then if something breaks after you deploy the change, Sentry can alert and say, well, this change broke all of your customers, so let's revert it. And then when you go to so that's on the front end side. Obviously, on the product analytics, we use Mixpanel and Heap to collect data from everything that happens on our front end side, as well as recorded sessions for internal use that we learn from. We learn a lot from seeing how users are playing around with our platform. So we use a great tool called SmartLook, which basically records sessions and even knows a little bit how to show where errors are happening and what errors are repetitive on the recorded sessions. And then when you
use Hotjar for that, it's a similar domain, but same. And also on the Mixpanel, you said Mixpanel, we use Amplitude, but again, ultimately it's the same stacks for the. By the way, the stack that you chose, is that also the best practice that you see out there in the industry? Just wondering, aggregating across also your customers and your SaaS customers, what do you see as the common solutions there?
Yeah, so we hear a lot of, so I'll say 50-50 on Mixpanel and Amplitude. Sentry is definitely used across the board for front end. So yeah, most of the customers that do collect front end errors, they'll use Sentry. Not all of them does, but if you do so, probably you're going to use Sentry. And in terms of backend, so we obviously use Prometheus and Grafana internally to collect everything that happens on the cluster. For the developer logs, we use Logs.io as our, and now we added distributed tracing as well on top of Jaeger to collect basically what happens on the developer side. And this is where it gets interesting, because on top of Logs.io, we have an Ops Genie, which alerts the developer on call if something is wrong. So the infrastructure basically plays nicely together. And that's basically what I see across the board with this kind of tooling. And on the API side of stuff, so we built around our own internal usage collection, basically infrastructure. We rely heavily on Redshift to collect everything, every API that goes into the system on an account level. And this is where we had to work really hard to get the account into the APIs. So we collect everything on the account level, and then we collect tools for BI analysts. Sagim, my co-founder, the CEO of the company, built nice SQL queries around tools like Redash and Zoho, and you know. So once you have the data, there are a bunch of stuff you can do with it.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb that I can say is that if you have the data, you should collect it. Obviously, not store it in expensive, I don't know, Athena or something like that. But at the very least, let's say, go for the cheap storage, like, I don't know, S3 or similar. But then again, making sure that you have the observability needed, and then, as you said, like a data warehouse type of investigations. For example, we use Periscope, Sisense, for analyzing, traditional BI tools that can allow you beyond as we said, beyond the IT monitoring, when you need to correlate and cross-reference so many different signals. That's a data analytics problem.
One thing I want to add on this. So yeah, it's a data analytics problem, but at the end of the day, we are, each company works as a unit. So the needs always go to the developers, but once the developers understand what is the reason for them to do, I don't know, to add another ETL which sends back I don't know, the user or the account status back to HubSpot or that kind of stuff. Once the developer, we explain the actual business value that such process gives us. So we see that they are extremely dedicated, because at the end of the day, this is the engine of any startup. Engaging with the customers, move them up in the funnel, and even if they are staying on a freemium, I gave myself as a great example. I stayed 6 months on the freemium model, okay, until I really, we grew, and it was really generous. But once we grew, I was certain that I'm not moving anywhere. I'm gonna start paying, and that's so. This is the nice thing about PLG. Eventually, if you stick there enough, and you'll see the growth of your customers, they'll go with you.
And as you said, measuring that and being able to understand what really brings them value and what makes them grow their usage, adopt more functionality, and go beyond maybe the community edition into an enterprise edition or commercial edition. And that's where observability gives you the sense of what is the journey of these customers, and which customers actually need more and you can help them, and which customers maybe will probably be satisfied with the community edition for quite some time. So one of the things that fascinate me is the topic of correlation, because we have so many data sources and so many different types of signals coming from different systems. And one of the things to build the picture is the ability to correlate these different signals, because the signal is the raw data, but correlating the different signals to draw the insights and to realize that this, signal from amplitude and from the UI correlated with some backend API usage, correlated with maybe even some performance aspect in the product, then translates to a certain experience. This is a challenge. So I'm wondering, what are your recommendations in correlating the different data signals?
So this is a real challenge, right? So I did mention that in Frontegg we are correlating based on organizations or based on account IDs that correlates basically the environments and that kind of stuff. And we had to build basically the infrastructure that would help us. So we have for example, we have a header that represents the account ID, we call it a vendor, that runs through the system in every given time. So even if it comes from the UI, it comes from an API, wherever it comes from, we know basically how to attach this header, and basically it goes all the way to the Redshift and to the data pipelines. There are, if you want to take a look at some of the industry best practice on how to collect in a single API, how to collect all of the data and to sync it basically to different tools, and maybe in some of the cases to transform it. Segment, which is now belongs to Twilio, does a great job on such use cases in terms of collecting the data, make sure that your API is you have a single API to send the data to Segment, and then you leave it to you don't need
you want
to
to say a few words just maybe on Segment for the audience who doesn't know the product?
Yeah, so Segment is a great, they call it the customer data platform, CDP. And the idea is that you have a single API to Segment to send all of the data, whether you're sending it from the backend, whether you're sending it from the front end, whatever tool that you are using, you have a single API to Segment. And then on Segment, you can add what they call data adapters. And then you basically can, upon receiving of this data, Segment basically takes it, pipes it, and moves it to the different tools in terms of Redshift, Snowflake. They have many connectors, SQS. They have so many connectors. You didn't even think that there are so many. And then the idea is that your API should not change if you want to add another connector to Segment. So that's another way of collecting all of the data and even transforming it on top of Segment. The downside of it is that you kind of lose control on the flows because you are now dependent on another tool. So we did it internally.
Yeah. And another question that comes often in these discussions is the challenge of persisting the data, both in terms of costs and in terms of different solutions that you have. How do you approach the persistence of the telemetry data that you collect?
Yeah, so normally we wanna split what I call hot data and cold data. So once data turns cold, I don't know, let's say observability from 3 months old, we can throw and put. We never delete anything, but we can throw and put on S3, which is pretty cheap. You can store terabytes and petabytes of data relatively cheap on S3. And you always analyze. I don't know. Last 3 months, you analyze. You call it the hot data. You pass it through ETLs and you put it on translatable tables, ready to use by BIs, ready to use by CEOs who want to collect visualization tools into it. But we never delete anything because I don't know. We might want to use it to see how the past year comparing to the year before. How the feature were adapted. So if we put it in S3 and then just load it into, because we don't care how much time it's going to run. So just load it, analyze it, put it back in S3, all works.
Sounds good. So just to wrap up, we're soon going to run out of time, but do you have any best practices and tips that you would like to give from Frontend, again, also from your experience across your dozens of customers, and what it would be? Both we mentioned some tooling and some practices, but if to aggregate, maybe a startup that is now starting or a company that is now growing beyond the one server thing, what would be your recommendation around the Sas Observability?
Yeah, so in terms of, first collect everything that you can. There are great tooling out there. We mentioned some of them here, but there are great tooling out there to collect as much data as you can, because it's going to help your business grow, which is basically, even if you're a developer or basically that's the joint effort of everyone. So collect as much data as you can and fail fast. That will help you fail fast, because if something is not working, the data will tell you that something is not working. So that's like the number one tip. It took us a while to adapt, but today in the PLG world, you want to collect as much data as you can, analyze it as fast as you can, and understand what exactly is not working, and basically change on the fly. And on terms of tooling and on the developer experience, use as many tooling as you can. There are some that does everything on one hand. There are some which known as market standard for logs, or market standard for product analytics. Use them and use them wisely, because it will help you basically grow.
Sounds good. I would also suggest, in terms of the tooling, you mentioned lots of tooling. One of the things that I found is that also an important criteria would be the ease of migration and ramp up. For example, we went with, as I mentioned, Periscope Sisense, which is based on SQL queries, which everyone knows SQL, so it was easy. And if you compare it to very common, very popular products such as Tableau or ClickView or Power BI, that you need to construct that on top of their own product and it's proprietary, then it's very easy. Very difficult, if you now need to migrate to another tool. And also, of course, it's not necessarily a common knowledge, unlike SQL querying. So much easier ramp up on SQL versus when you need to teach someone, a new employee, Tableau proprietary stuff or ClickView or others. So that's one thing I think about a vendor lock-in or ease of migration and also in terms of skill set. And the other one that I can add from our experience is that we connect everything to version control. We put everything, everything is documented. The ETLs, the databases, the BI, everything is tracked, so that we have a very easy way to track the changes. And if you need to make a change in some table, a schema, a column, I don't know what, you can immediately see the impact. So that's, I would add another maybe a couple of tips from my end.
Great tips.
Anyway, thank you very much, Aviad. That was a fascinating discussion and a topic that I should go back to earlier. Maybe it's my own past as a product manager in past lives, that I think that delving too much into the IT part is also not good. We need to also keep the broader focus of the company, and some of that is enabled. Is crucial for engineers to serve the internal customers, the internal users. If it's BI team, if it's the product managers, if it's even the senior management that needs to get visibility to steer and to tune. So it is a central part of our role as engineers to also remember that in addition to the end users, we also have the internal users that help us steer this boat and move fast and agile. And with that, I would like to invite you to join me for the next part, which is the breaking news. And today, going over, I mentioned before on our talk, but I wanted to mention that again here on the news. Last month, we had AWS outages, actually, I think 3, if I remember correctly, in a very short period of time, that took down many SaaS businesses, such as Slack, Hulu, Udemy, Asana, Coinbase. There's a long list of SaaS companies being impacted. And I think, it's not the first time, and I think the first time I wrote about it in my own personal blog was maybe almost 10 years ago. So it's not new, but still I see many organizations left exposed in these cases, and I think it's very important to use these opportunities to freshen up and reiterate the best practices and guidelines for business continuity and for disaster recovery. Things like design for failure, stateless and autonomous services, redundant hot copies spread across zones. You mentioned that you also do that in Frontegg, maybe even multi-region and multi-cloud when it calls for that. And very relevant, obviously, for this specific podcast is also automation and monitoring. The ability to detect quickly and maybe to respond, even automatic remediation as much as possible. I wrote also an article about that I will share on the show notes, but maybe you can share your 2 cents on that.
Yes.
Were you impacted? I'm just curious to hear your own personal experience.
Yeah. We were impacted. We were impacted by the US East fellow outage. The last one that our Kafka basically stopped responding, and it basically caused some waves in the cluster. So yeah, the nice thing about it is that we knew exactly when it was happening. We have so many monitoring. We are using so many different monitoring, because if one fails, we want to make sure that. And we knew when it happens, and then we started, working as a playbook. So I think one of the great tips around it is have a playbook ready, and drills. If you do drills, okay, you'll be prepared when it happens. And when it happens. It happens. Like, everyone are affected, but your ability to recover fast is crucial for your business continuity.
Exactly. Good summary of the main points. You can't avoid it, but you can automate and remediate, detect and remediate quickly, and that's the power.
Recover as fast as you can. Yeah.
And another major item on the news in the past month was the Log4j CV, the vulnerability. Actually, turned out to be 3 different vulnerabilities. So as soon as one was patched, people immediately come to realize the second one, and then the third one. And it was a high-profile one. It was like ranked, top 10 in the ranking. It's a 0-day exploit that can actually give remote code execution access. People can actually have full server control over your company, and that's Log4j that's been around for I don't know how long, and
years of many years,
virtually everywhere there. So it's painful for the industry and a painful lesson for all of us to see. Lot has been written about that. I will share the link to Apache's dedicated security page specifying the CVEs and the remediation. But the call to action for everyone who hasn't been, people who celebrated the New Year's and weren't aware, the mitigation is simply to upgrade to the latest Log4j2. So it's 2.3.2 for Java 6, it's 2.12.4 for Java 7, and 2.17.1 for Java 8 and later. And do go and read about that. And maybe the bright side of that was showing us how the massive success of Log4j by the extent of the hit. Written by 2 volunteering open source enthusiasts, and maybe this will give some more money, more funding, and more people to get involved and back up Log4j. Any thoughts on that from your end?
What fascinated me about the Log4j is, even if your code is not, we are not working with Java. But it hit us because AWS we are using MSK, which is Kafka, the managed Kafka. Yeah. So Kafka is implemented with Java, and then you have Nginx, and then so you had to basically we had to what we call
dependency, the nested dependencies.
An inventory count of all of the tools that we are using. Even if we are not using Java. If we're using any tool that is using Java, Kafka, I don't know, MySQL. We had to go to MySQL and see how MySQL was implemented, and it opened up. It was as critical as you could imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, even us, we are Java based on the backend, but we actually went for logback rather than log4j, so we weren't directly impacted. But as you said, you suddenly find the dependency nested somewhere within your platform that you need to address and you need to patch, and it's an important lesson for all of us.
Yeah, for us, it's nice to see. I mean, in the web application firewall, the number of requests we are getting for log4j headers, it's like 90% of the traffic. It's funny.
But then again, it shows the power of open source on the one hand and the extent of usage of popular open source tools. On the other hand, it makes us realize as a community, as an industry, and as a community that we need to invest to make sure that these are production ready, that we back them. Having one or two developers, maintaining one of the world's most extensive open sources, it doesn't make sense. We need to make sure that vendors back it, vendors get involved. And there is a way to maintain it and to get it to the place where it's solid, rock solid as much as possible for production grade. We saw also something around that with Node.js developers taking down a couple of libraries in protest.
Faker and Color, Faker and Color.
So also fresh off the news. So I definitely understand his frustration, having maintained that single-handedly and seeing no backing. I'm not sure if the means to make his point is the one that I would have taken, but the point nonetheless is that we as a community need to realize that the assets that we use are not coming out of thin air. They're actually there's a community behind it. Sometimes one or two even maintainers doing the whole work, and we need to make sure that we're there behind them to back it up. So that's an important lesson, at least for me as an open source enthusiast. I think that's all we have for today's episode. But I wanted to thank you again, Aviad, for joining me on this episode.
Thank you.
And I would like to obviously thank our listeners for joining in, whether on the live stream or on the podcasts. If you are listening to us on the podcast, do know that we are broadcasting live streaming the episode, so you can join the episodes to ask your own questions and comments and do that. You can also follow us on Twitter at OpenObserve for updates and to share your comments, suggestions, and news bits. You can find all the episodes on all the favorite podcast apps, as well as on YouTube. And I'm Dotan Horowitz, and thank you very much for listening. And on the next month's episode, we're going to have Suman, who is going to share with us some of his experience around high-scale, web-scale companies. And how he actually built homegrown, scalable solutions for observability. So do join in for next month's episode. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next month.